The 2025 NFL season is almost here. So in today's video, we are going to be doing my week 1 power rankings ahead of the 2025 NFL season. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. And we are going to begin in last place at number 32. I have the New Orleans Saints. Now, I think the Saints actually have some pieces to work with here. I like their young offensive line, but I have a hard time buying into either Spencer Rattler or Tyler Shock at quarterback. I also just don't trust the health of Chris Olave, nor do I think Chris Olave really elevates this offense that much. And then on the defensive side of things, I think they have pieces, but I don't think they have a full roster of defensive players that can really get the task done. I don't think the defense will be the worst, but I think the offense will really struggle, so ultimately I have them at 32. At number 31, I have the Tennessee Titans. Now, I think this Titans team has some actual pieces to go. It's just that it's year 1 of Cam Ward. I was not the biggest believer in Cam Ward when he was drafted. I didn't think he was worthy of the number 1 pick, but given the team need, I understood it. I think they have pieces kind of like the Saints, and I think they're better because they have Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, and I think J.C. Latham will have a nice year here too. But I just don't think they have the guys defensively. I don't think they have any elite pass rushers. I don't think they have any elite members in the secondary, barring L'Jarius Sneed having a great year. I just think there's a lot of questions within Tennessee. I'm also just not the biggest fan of their head coach, so that's why they're at 31. In my number 30, I have the Cleveland Browns. Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco. It don't matter. I think all 3 of those quarterbacks are being thrusted into a tough situation here in Cleveland with an offensive line that's older and not very good, a running back group that is not good right now, receiving core that has Jerry Jeudy and a bunch of dudes, and David Njoku's pretty good too. Now, defensively, I think they will have success because they do have Myles Garrett, they do have Denzel Ward, and there is some talented guys there. But kind of like in past years, I think this Browns defense will be held down with an offense that won't be particularly good. I think the Browns could be competitive, but I don't think they're going to win a lot of games, hence why they're at 30. Number 29, I have the New York Jets. Now, I think the Jets are taking a step back, but I actually think taking a step back is the right thing for this team to do. And that is because I think this Jets team has needed a direction these past 2 years. When they signed Aaron Rodgers, it was a sign that they were going all in with that current roster. But then the Achilles injury happened, and then 2024 happened, and clearly the team was not heading in the right direction. So when they signed Justin Fields and kind of maneuvered their roster in some specific ways, they really picked the direction of we're going to retool and build towards the 2027 draft or 2026 draft, where they're probably going to end up taking their franchise quarterback for the billionth time, it feels like. The Jets just do not have the firepower on the offensive end. I don't think they have any great weapons next to Garrett Wilson. I don't love their quarterback in Justin Fields. I like their young offensive line, and I think they have some fun running backs, so I think they will be able to run the football fairly well. I just don't think they're going to have the passing game to really compete out there. Defensively, they have Sauce, they have Quinnen, they have Quincy. They have guys in each level that I think are good, but I think there's still work that needs to be done within basically every single unit of this team, so hence why I have them at 29. Moving over to number 28, I have the Carolina Panthers. I think this Panthers offense will take a big step forward this year, but I ultimately think this defense is still going to hold them back. Nick Scorton, who I was a big fan of, is injured and probably not going to play for a big chunk of the season, and I think he was going to play a big role in this defensive line. So that kind of takes it down a notch. They have J.C. Horn, they have Derek Brown. I think those guys will be great players for them, but outside of them, I still have a lot of questions about the pass rush, about the secondary. You know, they have some guys, but I don't think it's a complete unit quite yet. But on the offensive end, I actually do have faith in Bryce Young and all the pieces there now with Ted McMillan, Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowell. I think Jatavion Sanders takes a step forward. I like their offensive line. So I think this offense takes a nice big jump forward, but I think the defense ultimately holds them back from winning a lot of games, which is fine. I think Bryce Young proves he's the guy this year. Then next year you boost up this defense. Then next thing you know, by 2-3 years from now, maybe they're trying to compete for a playoff spot. Number 27, I have the New York Giants. Now, they have kind of been the talk of the town in the preseason because of how good Jackson Dart has looked. But at the same time, let's just be a little bit realistic here. Their schedule is effing brutal. It's an absolutely nightmarish type schedule for the New York Giants, and I think that kind of holds them back a little bit. Now, I think this Giants team will be damn competitive next year. I love their defense. I think they have some legit pieces there. Great defensive line. I think their front seven in general is really good, with some talented pieces in the secondary too. And then on the offensive end, Russell Wilson is just a average to slightly below average quarterback. I have some questions about the offensive line. And, you got Neighbors, you have Slayton, and, you have Tyrone Tracy, also Cam Scotabo too. I think the question then becomes, when does Jackson Dart get his first start? I'm assuming he's not going to start week 1. I'm going to assume that's Russell Wilson. But when does Jackson Dart get that week 1 start? I think it's to be determined. At number 26, I have the New England Patriots. I love a lot of the moves they've made. And I think this is one of those teams that I could easily see outplay my personal ranking on the team. I just think it is 1 year too early. I think next year is when they are playoff contenders. I think this year is them building chemistry, building some relationships. The head coach, the quarterback, that stuff needs to get figured out. I know I might get some flack for them being a little bit lower, but I just don't think it's a complete roster yet. I think they have pieces building in the right direction, and I think next year is when they take a big jump forward. But I think this year, you're going to see a couple struggles here and there. I still think they need help on the defensive line, primarily with an elite pass rusher. I still think the offensive line leaves a lot to be desired. I like Stephon Diggs and I like Kyle Williams, but I need to see those guys take a big step here, especially Kyle Williams, not necessarily Stephon Diggs, but some of the young guys in the receiving corps. I need to see them take a step forward. I like Travion Henderson, but when does he kind of become that full-time back? And for Drake May, he's still developing. I think everyone wants to put him on this, rocket ship and call him the next MVP, the next superstar quarterback. Let's give him time. He was a developmental quarterback that I think has all the talent in the world. But even Josh Allen, for example, it took him like 3 to 4 years to really understand it. I think that's kind of the same thing here with Drake May. So I think this year it's too early to call them contenders. I think next year, though, we can have a different conversation, assuming 2025 goes well. Again, I do think they will probably outplay their ranking this year, though. We'll see ultimately if I'm right or wrong. 25, I have the Miami Dolphins. When you have Tua, when you have Tyreek Hill, when you have Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, I think you're going to have an explosive offense. With that said, the offensive line sucks, and the defense, I think they have a good defensive line, specifically pass rushers, but that secondary is hot ass. So I think you're going to see the Dolphins in a lot of shootout games where you're going to see them throw the ball all over the yard, but at the same time, the opposing team is going to throw even more so all over the yard on that secondary for Miami. I think Miami wins games versus a lot of bad teams, but I think they lose to a lot of good teams. So I think they're a pretty below average team this year. 24 out the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think this offense takes a huge step forward this year. I love Liam Cohen. I think Trevor Lawrence has maybe his best year of his career. You have BTJ. You have Travis Hunter. I think the running backs will probably play better this year, and I trust the offensive line for the most part. The defense, though, is going to hold them back. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Travis Hunter is not listed as their CB1, because I think he's probably their best cornerback on the roster. I really worry about the secondary, and the defensive line, I just don't trust them against the run right now. So I think Jacksonville will be a really good offense that can score points, but ultimately the defense will hold them back. Moving over to number 23, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I think the Colts have the depth chart and the roster to be one of the better teams out there, but I think they have a quarterback room that is not good at all. I think Jones could have a really good year for Indianapolis, but even a good year for Daniel Jones is like Gardner Minshew with Indianapolis type of good, which, by the way, that Colts team almost made the playoffs, so keep that in mind. I ultimately think that Indianapolis is just a quarterback away from being a really competitive team. I think they're missing that quarterback. If they can get a quarterback next year like a Drew Aller, and Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, one of those superstar young quarterbacks, then maybe we have a different conversation about Indianapolis next year. But for now, I have them at number 23. Moving to number 22, I have the Chicago Bears. Now, I think this Bears team takes a big step forward this year. I think it's kind of like the New England Patriots, where it's just give me one more year. I don't want to rush to call Caleb an MVP candidate. I don't want to rush to call this offense top 10. I don't want to rush to call this defense top 10. Let's give it some time. Let's actually wait and see what this team looks like. Now, I look at the depth chart. They don't really have a ton of issues on this team. I think they maybe lack some depth in certain positions, which could become an issue if some injuries do start to occur. The reason why I have them fairly low, though, is because I think there will be some early season struggles from Caleb and Ben Johnson as those two guys try to figure out their tendencies and how things are really going to work. But I think by mid-season, if they're 500, I could really see them going on a stretch down the season to get them to like 10-7 or, above a 500 record. I think they'll be a good team, but I think, again, kind of like New England, just give them one more year. Moving over to number 21, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, when you talk about bad defenses, the Raiders might have the worst, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. You got Max Crosby, and outside of that, it's pretty bare out there. Now, they have some youth, they have some guys. I don't want to call them all bad players. I think they have some pass rushers too, but there's a lot of unproven guys out there that need to make some plays this year. So I'm not going to call that defense anything special. It's definitely not a good unit. But the reason why I have them higher than some of these other teams that I think have a higher upside is because I trust the veteran experience of their head coach and their quarterback. Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, those guys have chemistry. Those guys have continuity, obviously, with their time in Seattle. They've been in the league for many, many years. Whereas for a Ben Johnson and a Caleb, or a Drake May and a Vrabel, those guys, especially the quarterbacks, are still young and developing. Whereas for Geno, he's been there and done that. So I'm expecting this Raiders offense to be really good next year, especially with Genty and Brock Bowers. I think the defense keeps them from being a playoff contender, though. Moving over to number 20, I have the Dallas Cowboys. You guys can see I have my Micah Parsons jersey on. You guys know I'm a Cowboys fan. I had to re-record this bit because ultimately the Cowboys did make one of the craziest decisions I've ever seen. They traded Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. And in all honesty, I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are significantly worse because of trading Micah Parsons. And that is because we actually have a little bit of some depth there within the edge rushing room, and we get to add a little bit to the interior. So I think in terms of rankings, they didn't really fall too far in my rankings. They basically stayed where I had them at. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys got enough in return for Micah Parsons, but at the same time, I still think this Cowboys team is going to be about what I thought they were going to be. They're going to be a very high-powered offense that's going to rely heavily on Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and George Pickens. They're probably not going to be very effective running the football. They're going to be trusting a young offensive line to make some holes for Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue and so on and so forth. And I think defensively now they will be able to stuff the run a little bit better, but I worry a little bit now about the pass rush just being consistent. I think if the secondary can stay healthy, they can create some turnovers, which will give the offense the ball. I think Dallas will beat a lot of bad teams, but I think they're probably going to lose to a lot of the good teams, which makes them probably around an 8-9 or a 9-8 team. Number 19, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now they just signed Trey Hendrickson to a 1-year, I think $30 million deal, which honestly, I put it on Twitter. I think the Bengals won this whole little controversy here. I think for Trey Hendrickson, it makes really no sense to sign that contract. I'm actually stunned he did, but he ultimately did so, and I'm actually really stunned he did. Regardless, though, they get the deal done, and they get their, one of their best pass rushers in the NFL back on their defense. The Bengals defense is still not very good. I think their front seven could be improved from last year with some of the new guys, but not significantly better. I think their secondary is still very questionable with especially the safeties. But you have Joe Burrow, you have Jamar Chase, and you have T. Higgins. And I think Chase Brown also takes a step forward this year too. So I think you have the guys offensively to score all the points you need to win games. It's just going to come down to, can the defense, force some turnovers? Can they stuff the run? Can they stop a pass here and there? If the Bengals defense takes a big step forward, then this Bengals team does too. I'm not really expecting it though. I think this offense carries them to maybe the 7th seed if they're lucky. Number 18, I have the Atlanta Falcons. I'm a big believer in Michael Penix Jr., but kind of like some of these other quarterbacks, I need to see you play on the field a little bit more than, 3 or 2 games last year. With that said, in those games, he did look pretty good. He looked very confident and comfortable. And clearly Atlanta's feeling comfortable with him too, because he didn't play any of the preseason games. The reason why I have the Falcons fairly high here is because they have a really good roster with a good offensive line, excellent running backs, great receivers, a tight end that might get drafted number 1 in fantasy, but we'll wait and see on that one. And the Falcons defense, I think they have a decent secondary. It's just going to kind of come down to what does the pass rush look like. But they did add James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker there, which I don't think are perfect prospects, but I think they will be able to force some pressure on the quarterback. So because they made those upgrades with honestly a fairly limited budget because of the Kirk Cousins deal, I think this Falcons team will be really good. I don't know if they'll win the division, but I think they'll come pretty darn close. I have the Falcons at 18, but I could see them very much outplaying this ranking. Number 17, I have the San Francisco 49ers. This is a hard team to place here on this one because you just don't really know where to put them. They have talents, they have the superstars, but then outside of the superstars, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. The receiving corps gives me a lot of pause. McCaffrey and the injury last year scares me too. The offensive line is still very questionable, but I do trust Brock Purdy. I do trust Kyle Shanahan. I think they can move the ball offensively. Defensively, I think they're a little bit better from last year because they did make some upgrades and there is more continuity from last year, but still got a lot of questions. This Niners team is just getting worse every single year, and I think this year they take another step back, but I still think they're a pretty competitive team. And when you look at their schedule, they got a pretty easy schedule that could allow the Niners to win 10 plus games next year and possibly make the playoffs. Now, real quick, we're in the midpoint here. Before we get to 16 and number 1, I do want to quickly plug in my podcast. We already did a power rankings video, a longer version of this video where I give my power rankings and my co-host gives his power rankings too. So if you want to check that out, check the comments, check the pinned comment. You'll see it in the video catalog. We did a power rankings video very similar to this one. Let's keep it pushing though. At number 16, I have the Arizona Cardinals. I'm a pretty big fan of Arizona, and I think if you had asked me this question right after the draft, I think I would have had the Cardinals more like 14, 13, or 12. But because some of these other teams have looked a little bit better, and because I don't want to rush to conclusions with Arizona, I'm going to put them right at number 16. I think they have the talent, and I think if Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. can get going finally, I think it really opens up this Cardinals offense to be really good next year. I think they have the pieces defensively now to really be pretty solid. They have Josh Sweat. I like what they did on the interior of the defensive line. I like some of the guys in the secondary too. The linebackers are just okay, but I think there could be fine enough. The offensive line gives me some pause. It's not the greatest unit, but Paris Johnson Jr. is developing nicely. This one kind of comes down to Kyler Murray though. Kyler, you have the talent around you. You have the roster. Quit being stupid. Quit making mistakes. Go out there and ball next year and get this team to a playoff spot. I think he definitely could. Number 15, the Seattle Seahawks. I know it's preseason, but the preseason has got me pretty excited for some Seattle football. The offense looks sharp. They look almost clinical in a way where it almost looks robotic with what they're doing out there, but I think it looks really fun. I think they're doing some really good things there. I think they have the offensive talent to be really good next year. It's just going to come down, what does this offensive line look like? If this offensive line can stay healthy and play better football, I think they have the pieces to be a pretty solid team. I think defensively, they're going to be probably a top 10-ish unit next year because I think they have the pass rushers, the depth, the run stuffers, the linebackers, the secondary, especially if Nicky Monwari can make some plays next year. So I think defensively, they're going to be really good. It just comes down to that offensive line. Last year, that offensive line was abysmal, and it stopped that Seahawks team from honestly making the playoffs. But now you add in a Gray Zabel. Now you're hopefully healthy. I think this offensive line could take a step forward. And if they do, the Seahawks team, in my opinion, could make the playoffs. It could make some noise there. I love what this team is building, but I just want to see it on the field with this offensive line. Next up at number 14, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like a lot of things about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I really do believe in this defense. I just have a lot of questions with the offense. Now, sticking to the defense, I think the Steelers are going to have one of the best and most elite defenses out there. I think they have the pass rushers. I think they have the linebackers. I think their secondary is improved as well. They have some dogs in all three levels. For me, again, that offense does leave a lot to be desired. I know that Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback and the best quarterback they've had since like prime Ben Roethlisberger. But you have two young tackles that for the most part are kind of unproven. No real receiving threat alongside DK Metcalf, and a running back room which I think has some talent. I love Caleb Johnson, but is a little bit unproven in terms of who can be that RB1. Not to mention Rodgers is 40-something years old. He's basically a statue in the pocket. I really do worry that he's going to eat up a number of sacks this year because of some of the question marks on the tackles. And I just have a hard time imagining this offense being able to find a ton of separation. Now, maybe somebody could step up and play a bigger role for this Pittsburgh Steelers team in the passing game, but as of right now, I'm just not seeing it. Hence why they're 14th. I do think they'll make the playoffs, and I think they'll be very competitive, but I don't know if they're going to be like a serious playoff threat once they do get in there. They might win one playoff game, but probably not 2 or 3. Number 13, I have the Houston Texans. I like a lot of things about this Texans team. I think they have one of the best defenses out there in the entire NFL. I think offensively speaking, they have weapons that I really do like. For me, I'm an offensive line guy, and when you have questions on the offensive line, I think it greatly diminishes your chances of being a very highly successful team, especially come playoff time. I believe in everything else about this Texans offense. I think Stroud is a great quarterback. I think they have Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb, who are both, in my opinion, solid running backs. I love their young receivers with Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, Noel, and all those guys. Dalton Schultz, the fine tight end. And I think defensively, they have pass rushers. They have corners that can create turnovers. They have linebackers that can come downhill and thump people. I think they have basically everything set up. But with this weird offensive line that is kind of like a whole bunch of free agents and some new draft picks, I just have a hard time seeing them really being able to keep CJ Stroud upright. Last year, the offensive line was abysmal, and this year they overhauled it, but I don't think they overhauled it with quality guys. Maybe outside, like I think Cam Robinson is fine. I think Ariante Ursi was a fun pickup, but to start him right away is a very questionable move. And outside of that, some of the guys they brought in, I just didn't think they were significant upgrades, like a Laken Tomlinson. I don't think he's an upgrade. I worry about this offensive line. I know there's a new OC in the building, and I think he'll get the task done. I think they're going to make the playoffs. They might even win a playoff game like last year, but I think they're greatly restricted with this offensive line from being a even more competitive team. Moving over to number 12, I have the LA Chargers. Now, admittedly speaking, the Chargers and Texans are very flippable. You can kind of put them in any different way. But with the Chargers, I just felt a little bit better about them because I trust their offensive line more. Now, yes, Rashawn Slater is out for the season, but I'm not too overly concerned about that. You move Trey Pipkins out now. You have Joe Alt move to the left side. Mekhi Becton will play a big role as that right guard. And I think for the most part, that offensive line looks pretty decent on paper. Outside of that, I think they improved the offense with some new weapons that I think will each play a nice big role for this team. I also love the addition of Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris. And if the defense can play very well like they did last year, I think this is going to be a really well-balanced team with a quarterback that has the upside to be like a top 8, top 7 quarterback. I love their play caller. I love the direction of this team. I think they have a great offense and a great defense. They can run downhill. They can also pass with any team out there. I think they can be a high-powered offense when they need to be, but they can also be a team that relies on defense when they have to. So I think I like their balance just a little bit more than Houston, whereas for Houston, I really worry about that offensive line. LA, not so much, but I just have a couple concerns about, you know, Rashawn Slater's not on the team right now, which is a huge loss, but I'm not overly concerned about it. Number 11, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I love this Buccaneers team, and I think very highly of who they have on this roster. I just have two, like, does Hassan Reddick really step up, or can they find somebody else within that edge rushing unit who can consistently get after the quarterback? And number 2, what does this offense look like without Liam Cohen? Last year's offense was top 5 in multiple categories. Baker Mayfield had his best year of his entire career. And without him now on the team, I could potentially see a little bit of regression, even though I do think the roster is better. Not to mention, you have injuries with Chris Godwin, Tristan Wirfs that you're going to have to handle throughout the season, and hopefully they get better as things go on. So they're at my number 11, but I think if they can answer the question as to what does their pass rushers look like, and, you know, can they stay healthy, of course, and what does the offense look like, if those things can get handled out nicely, then they'll move up my board easily into my top 10. For now, they're at number 11 just to play it safe, but we'll have to wait and see on that. At number 10, I have the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Minnesota Vikings have everything you want on a roster. The only question I have for this team is, what does J.J. McCarthy look like? On the offensive end, I think they have one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL to go along with, in my opinion, the best receiver in Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receiver 2s in Jordan Addison, an excellent tight end in T.J. Hockenson, a nice pair of running backs now to go along with a defense that I think doesn't have a ton of holes. I have a couple questions about the secondary, but I think they could get answered pretty quickly. They have pass rushers. I like their linebackers. Harrison Smith is still out there. You got a leader in the back end. I just think this team has everything you want. Also to go along with an offensive-minded head coach, who I think is one of the best out there. Now, the question they will have to answer is on J.J. McCarthy. If J.J. McCarthy does not come to play next year, then obviously I have a ton of questions about this team. But if J.J. McCarthy does show up and does play well, then I feel really confident about this Vikings team and their chances of making the playoffs. Moving over to number 9, I have the Washington Commanders. I think very highly of Jaden Daniels. I also think very highly of Dan Quinn. But I do think this roster does come with some slight limitations. Now, that's not to say this team sucks by no means, but this is a team that is handling a lot of older pieces. I think there is some experience on this team, and I think their quarterback is excellent. I just don't know if they made enough changes this offseason to significantly get better. On the offensive line, I think they will be better. Laramie Tunsil off the left tackle. I think Josh Connolly probably starts at right tackle. You have to feel pretty good about that. You have Krosky Merritt, who's kind of coming out of nowhere to be potentially your new RB1. We'll see if that ends up working out for them. You just signed Terry McLaurin, like, I think 2 weeks ago at this point, so that's really positive. I'm not the biggest fan of Deebo Samuel being your wide receiver 2, but maybe he could provide some boost to this receiving core, especially as maybe more of an underneath threat or just a gadget guy. I still think they need to address wide receiver in the next couple years. And then on the defensive side of things, I think they got better, but I don't know if it would necessarily be significantly. You do add Von Miller to the pass rushing unit, which again is an upgrade, but not necessarily a significant one, because at this stage of his career, Von Miller is like almost 40 years old and he can still go a little bit, but you're not going to get 10 to 15 sacks out of the guy. You'd be lucky to get 5. I love Frankie Louvu. I think Bobby Wagner is still playing at a very high level. If Marshawn Lattimore plays at an elite level this year, then I think it significantly boosts the secondary. So I like this Commanders team, but I think kind of like last year, they're going to have to be carried by Jaden Daniels. And if they can do that, then I think they'll make the playoffs. They might even win the NFC East, although I think the Philadelphia Eagles have that. But you never know. Maybe the Commanders could make a run for it. They'll be good. I think they will make the playoffs. I think they have talented pieces to go along with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I just have some concerns about the age of this roster and what can you really get from some of these older guys at this stage of their career. Moving over to number 8, my arch nemesis at this stage, the Green Bay Packers. Again, wearing the Micah Parsons jersey. Had to record these past couple because it all got destroyed once the Parsons trade happened. The Green Bay Packers have moved up my board significantly. I think this team really lacked an elite pass rusher last year. Rashawn Gary was supposed to be that guy, but last year it just never really came to fruition. Lucas Van Ness was also, thought of very highly to potentially be that opposite pass rusher, but it hasn't come to fruition yet either. So what did this team do? Well, they went out there and traded 2 first-round picks and an aging defensive tackle for arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL. I think he's probably behind Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. Then there's the conversation between him and Nick Bosa, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson. Micah Parsons, though, is in some very elite competition right there. He is a consistent 10 sack a season guy. I think he's arguably probably going to get 15 or more this year. Yes, he's getting paid heavily, and honestly, $47 million is a lot of money to work with, but the Green Bay Packers had the money to spend. They also had the need there off the edge. The Green Bay Packers, I think, have a really solid defense with, I think, awesome safeties in Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams. I like their linebackers, especially Edgerrin Cooper, as somebody that can come downhill and blitz a little bit here and there. Rashawn Gary's a fine edge rusher, but now you put him opposite of Micah Parsons, and I think that'll unlock Rashawn Gary even more so. Without Kenny Clark, maybe the interior run defense could be slightly worse, but I'm not too concerned about that. And then on the offensive end, you added a ton to the offensive line, and you added another weapon in Matthew Golden, which I think could significantly improve this offense. So right then and there, it's a massive successful offseason for the Packers. You fix some of your major offensive issues. You still have Josh Jacobs, who's going to run the crap out of the football. And defensively, I don't love their cornerbacks, but I think in some ways, maybe I've overblown the issue because last year they didn't have Jair Alexander for most of the year, and the secondary for the most part was fine. Now you add in a Micah Parsons, who is going to be a constant threat for quarterbacks on every single passing down, and that's going to help out your secondary and honestly probably help Xavier McKinney get even more turnovers. So I think this Packers team has a great chance of winning their division. I do have a couple questions within this division that could potentially allow the Packers to beat out a Detroit or a Minnesota for this division. It's totally possible. For now, they're at my number 8, but give it a few weeks, they may be even higher. Moving over to number 7, I have the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos are the one team that I could see a world where they might be a bit overrated. However, I think the Broncos have one of the best defenses in the NFL with a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback. Some upgrades in the secondary with Jahdae Barron, who I'm a big fan of, who will play probably opposite of Pat Surtain or maybe within the nickel, wherever they really want to put him at. I also think they have a really good head coach, and I think Bo Nix will take a step forward this year. The big thing this team has to answer this year, can they beat high-level competition like a Buffalo, like one of those really good teams? Last year, they didn't really beat too many upper echelon teams last year. They were really beating up on some bottom feeders. This year, I want to see them find ways to beat these big teams. I'm not saying they got to beat Kansas City twice and LA twice. I'm not necessarily saying that. But can they go 1-1 versus Kansas City and 1-1 versus the Chargers and, have a win here and there versus a top 15 team? Because right now, I think they'll be a really good team that manages to find their way into the playoffs. But until they can prove to me they can consistently beat high-level competition, I'll probably have them as a first-round exit. Moving to number 6, I have the Detroit Lions. Obviously, last year, prior to the injuries, arguably the best team in the NFL. Then the injuries hit, and all of a sudden, this Lions team looked kind of lost out there on the defensive side of things. This year, they are looking, for the most part, pretty healthy, but a new OC, a new DC, you also lose your starting center, and right now, I don't really know if you have a dominant pass rush. All that said, I'm not overly concerned. I think they have so much talent. I think they have all the pieces necessary. I think they're going to be a damn good team. However, until they can prove it to me on the field that the new coordinators are not going to be an issue, I have to kind of hold them back to number 6. But now we enter into my top 5, and at number 5, I have the Los Angeles Rams. Now, for this Rams team to ultimately be in my top 5 later in the season, they got to prove to me that they can stay healthy. That has been one of the biggest issues with this Rams offense the past few years, is the health of Matthew Stafford and some of the guys like Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp. If Stafford misses time, it's going to significantly change my opinion of this team. If Stafford finds a way to stay healthy, though, I think they have the receivers. I think they have the offensive line. I think they have the running back. They have the play caller and a front 7 that can absolutely go. The only positional question I have is maybe within the secondary, but even then, I'm not too concerned about it. The only big issue for this team is just, can they stay healthy? If they can stay healthy, I think they have legitimate Super Bowl aspiration, because I think they have the guys that can absolutely go on both sides. But if injuries are a factor and the secondary doesn't improve, then, this Rams team might fall down a little bit. I want to buy into this team so damn badly, but they have to prove they can stay healthy. And if they can, then, the Rams, they might be Super Bowl favorites or Super Bowl contenders. For now, I have them at 5. I think they're really close. Just stay healthy, Matthew Stafford, please. Number 4, I got the Buffalo Bills. I think they have all the talent in the world. Josh Allen, James Cook, the receivers are great. The offensive line is good. They added a crap ton to their defensive line. I think their secondary is fine for the most part. My big concern for Buffalo is just, can you beat Kansas City in the playoffs? Like, that's just sort of the big thing. I think they'll cruise through the regular season with probably 12 plus wins. They'll probably win in round 1, maybe even round 2, but can they get over the Chiefs? Can they get over the Ravens in the world? Granted, they did beat the Ravens last year, but this year, can they beat the Ravens again? So it's a big question mark. I think they're a really good team. These top 4, you can put them in any order. Number 3, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. I think there is some roster questions with the Chiefs, but what makes me put them at number 3, you just got to believe in Mahomes and Andy Reid, man. They have not necessarily the greatest offensive line now, with a lot of questions on both tackle positions and the left guard. Rashee Rice might get suspended. What does the running backs look like? But you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Andy Reid, Kelsey, who just got engaged to Taylor Swift. Shout out to my boy. That looks like it'll be a fun little wedding there. And the defense that I think can absolutely go. So I think the Chiefs will be fine. But some new competition within the AFC, like the Broncos, the Chargers, and even the Raiders are really good now. So maybe they fall down a little bit. Number 2, I got the Philadelphia Eagles, your Super Bowl reigning champions, the defending champs of the world. They are one of my favorites to win it all this year. They're my favorites in the NFC, but they do have some questions they have to answer. Mekhi Becton's off the team, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Darius Slay. I love their draft. I also thought they made some sneaky, solid additions in free agency too. But, does that depth look to potentially bite them in the butt a little bit? I still have them at number 2. They could easily be my number 1. But at my number 1, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I just don't really have any questions about this Ravens team. I think they have the secondary, the front 7, the offensive line, the weapons on the offensive end. I think they have, in my opinion, right now, the best quarterback in the NFL, regular season wise. I think they have probably the second best running back next to Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. I think they're too deep in tight end. I love their receiving core. I think it'll be quite fun. And defensively, I'm expecting this Ravens defense to maybe be the best defense in the entire NFL. The question for the Ravens, can you beat the Chiefs in the playoffs? Can you beat the Bills in the playoffs? Can you continue to get better and better and better? If not, I don't know, man. I think that you have to start asking yourself about Harbaugh. I think you have to start asking yourself about Lamar in the playoffs if they can't get over the hill. But I think they will this year. They are my number 1 team heading into 2025. But in the comment section below, let me know your top 10 teams. And also let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.